This is Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio.
Hi, and welcome to Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio. You know, each week on the podcast, we talk about the worldwide freedom movement. That's what we're passionate about at the Atlas Network, but specifically it's about people. It's about the leaders, it's about the stories, it's about what's happening all over the world and how we can ensure human dignity, freedom can expand, the principles of liberty and classical liberalism. But today we have a conversation with somebody I think is one of the most interesting people in the world. And so I'm really excited that we have time to spend today with Richard Durana from the Institute of Economic and Social Studies in Slovakia. Richard, thank you so much for being on the program.
Hi, Mike. Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
So one of my favorite questions, Richard, we're going to jump right into it, that I like to ask guests all the time is, how do you describe to others what it is that you do?
Well, this is pretty difficult in my country and in the environment of former Soviet satellite country, because as you might imagine, there is no tradition of think tanks or the NGOs or non-profits who are dealing with the ideas of liberty, ideas of economic prosperity, and like the communists wiped this off completely. So even after, what is it actually? It's 35 years after the fall of communism, after the collapse of communism, it is still pretty uncommon and kind of abstract for people to think about think tanks. So what I'm trying to explain is that we are trying to improve the world. We are trying to improve the well-being of everyone by promoting the ideas of free competition, prosperity, liberty, also the personal liberty, and the kind of political freedom, right? So usually when I explain this to let's say politicians or journalists or those kind of people, I rarely use a word liberal or classical liberal. I always use the word free market, because the liberal, it is always kind of label, and you don't want to get labeled, right? Because then you kind of narrow your audience. So our strategy is that we use the free market think tank and free market for description of what we are trying to achieve. Also, like right now, there are plenty non-profits in my country, but they're more focused on, let's say, work with children, work with animals, human rights, and sports and education and stuff. So all kind of activities that you can imagine. But in terms of think tanks, this is very rare. So actually, there are maybe two functional operating working think tanks in Slovakia. So in INESS, we say INESS, not INESS. INESS is one of them, and we are kind of leading not only the free market think tank, but also leading economic think tank in my country.
Well, I want to talk to you about your country. I want to talk about Slovakia and set the stage for everyone. Definitely want to talk more about INESS. So let's first talk about Slovakia and the story of Slovakia. So help the audience, bring us up to present day. You mentioned it before. The last 35 years have been quite a bit, this environment that you've started in. So if we show up to Slovakia today, what is the lay of the land?
Slovakia has a kind of interesting trajectory within last 35 years. So first, let's say 10 years after the fall of communism, during this transition to democracy and democratic way of coordination and everything, it was more like a wild, I would say. We had the authoritarian prime minister who was trying to tie the country together and with a strong hand. Then in 98, the election came, and a coalition of democratic powers, forces took over the country, And we had two governments which really made very, very important free market reforms. One of them was, for instance, the flat tax reform. We were the first country on the continent to introduce the flat tax, 19% flat tax. We also did a very important reform of labor code, of the labor market regulations. Slovakia at those times had, after this reform, had a very flexible labor code, and it was attractive country for the investors. So those reforms put Slovakia to the investors map. Also, we did a reform of pension schemes. So we introduced the kind of Chilean-like pension scheme model. So before that, it was the pay-as-you-go model. Now we also have this second pillar and also the third private pillar. So people can save their money in private funds and private insurance agencies. So those were, and also many other reforms. Like we also restructuralized the debt of the country, which caused, and also the banking sector, which caused like 10% of GDP. So this government kind of prepared the country for prosperity, and for they welcomed for foreign investors who obviously came because this was very pro-business friendly environment. And also the location of Slovakia is very attractive because it is in the middle of the Europe. It is in the heart of the Europe. From the capital of Slovakia, Bratislava, you can, if you drive 50 minutes, you are in Vienna, in the capital of Austria. If you drive 3 hours west, you are in Prague, the capital of Czech Republic. If you drive 2 hours southeast, you are in Budapest, the capital of Hungary. And if you drive 5 hours northeast, you are in Warsaw, the capital of Poland. So it is a kind of hub, right? So Bratislava has a very good location, and also the ways of transportation, also on the Danube River, and also there are roads, there are railways and stuff. So it is not kind of an coincidence or so that Slovakia became very soon the #1 car manufacturer in the world when the production is calculated per capita. So Slovakia is now producing the most cars per capita in the whole world. Like we have Volkswagen, we have Kia, we have Peugeot, we have Citroën, we have Jaguar Land Rover. And obviously all these automotive manufacturers, they need a huge supply chain. So there is tens of thousands of people working for automotive industry in my country. So this was a kind of nice period of these free market reforms. Since 2006, when the next government came with the Prime Minister of Social Democratic Party, who is actually still in charge, the things started to erode. All these free market reforms actually they were not touched in the very beginning, because even the socialists saw the fruits that the free market reforms were bringing, right? So they saw the decline of unemployment, the increase of wages, and increase of prosperity. So in the very beginning, they didn't touch those reforms. But then obviously it is the temptation of all socialists to redistribute, to buy the voters and to buy the electorate. So then they started to decompose all these free market reforms, and now we are in the situation where we need more reforms that any time before.
Okay, Richard, so you're one of the founders. You've been with the Institute for Economic and Social Studies in Slovakia since the beginning. So you've talked to people about what you do and what INESS does, and how do you explain to folks that are unfamiliar with think tanks and they don't understand the work, how do you explain to them on a day-to-day basis what it is that you do?
This is super complicated because people really don't have a clue what a think tankers do. They mostly think that we are closed in the office, talking to each other, trying to figure out something. But it's more like real work, right? You sit at the computer, you meet with people and stuff. So what I'm trying to explain is that, like, as I said in the beginning, like we are trying to change the world for the better. So it can't be done from behind the table. So obviously you have to do hard analytical work and in-depth analysis and stuff, but also you need to talk to people, talk to donors who support your work, talk to stakeholders, talk to politicians, opinion makers, journalists, and everyone. So it's a complex work, and I'm struggling. Like it depends on whom I'm talking to. So sometimes it's easier. Sometimes even when I talk to, I don't know, my kids or something, it's difficult. Like they can't imagine like what kind of work this is.
Well, what I find the most interesting about this and why I wanted to ask you that question is because our audience is going to find it interesting to learn that you didn't start as an economist or start working in public policy, right? Your background is in what we would refer to as the hard sciences, right? You're a research scientist working in biochemistry. So tell us that background, and then I've got to know how you made the shift to now, like you said, saving the world.
That is a good point, Mike. Yes, my background is more like hard science, scientific. I got a majors from organic chemistry and a PhD in biochemistry. And I was working as a research scientist at the Slovak Academy of Sciences, and I was developing vaccines, like neoglycoconjugate vaccines against the candidiasis.
Fascinating.
So this was, yeah, but even during those times, I was already very much interested in the topics of free markets, economics, liberty, and stuff. I founded INESS with my brother and a colleague of ours, Juraj. So we are calling us like three founding fathers. And even before setting up the INESS, we had a long discussions, long readings, long disputes about Austrian economics, about the books, and about everything. Even before starting INESS, we were writing to newspapers, op-eds, and were presenting our ideas at some public events and stuff. So incepting the INESS was a kind of it was kind of finish line of all these like pre-INESS activities, which took like years. Like it was not like 1 or 2 years; it was maybe 5 years or something. So it was a kind of natural trajectory, which led to founding INESS.
You and I have a mutual friend, Joe Lehman, with the Mackinac Center in Michigan, and he has somewhat of a similar story, right? He was at Dow Chemical and tells the story that one day he decided as an engineer that he wanted to be part of trying to save the world and be part of the worldwide freedom movement that he is to this day, as you and I are. One of the things that you have talked about quite a bit with myself, Joe, and other peers throughout Atlas Network is a discussion around populism. So I want to dive in and talk about that quickly. You've mentioned that it creates a challenge in the rise of populism is creating a challenge in policy making and specifically the impact on Central and Eastern Europe. So for our audience that may not understand the context, what does the word populism mean? What are you referring to when you talk about populism?
This is not that easy question. And also, it doesn't have a very straightforward answer and response. The populism is not new, right? So it's been around for hundreds of years, maybe for millennia. It is about like buying people with nice talks for others' money, and it is a very old concept, which has now became visible, like super visible, super powerful, And actually, Niels Carlson from Sweden wrote a nice book about populism last year. So I recommend to read it. It is a nice like description, definition, how to fight the populism. So all these things. I wouldn't say that this is like especially the problem of Central Europe or our region. I don't even think that it is only European problem. It is the worldwide problem, or at least let's say the Western hemisphere. So you see like what's going on in the US or other countries as well. So,
But let me ask you, what makes populism such a challenge for societies or for policymaking or anything? Why do you have concern around it?
my concern is that the populism kind of destroys or defeats the reason, and it more attracts the emotions. And so this is why fighting with the or fighting back with the ideas and with the reasons and with the policy advocacy and with arguments, it's way more difficult than any time before. And I would partly also blame the social media for this, because now like everyone now is a voter on a social media, and we actually don't have also the structure of democracies have changed. So because now we have elections every day on social media, like people are writing their opinions, writing their stories, they're liking, they're disliking and stuff, and the politicians are very likely to respond to these like opinions on daily basis, you know. So it's not like 4 years election terms or something. Like we actually still have these four years election terms, but in terms of like preparing the policies and the legislation and the legislative proposals, like now it's way faster, way quicker. And as I said, like politicians are responding to this, and we have like daily elections on the internet.
You know, one of the other things you've talked about quite a bit, I'll capture your thought in saying like comfort becomes complacency, right? And so it's this idea that as societies become wealthier and as people become wealthier, at times we forget what it is, the structure, the paradigm, the order that helped lead to that upward mobility in society. And earlier you talked about the last 35 years in Slovakia. So why has this issue been something that Richard has been talking about, and why is it something that you think is vitally important that we all understand?
Well, the Western societies are becoming richer, as you say, like they're becoming more prosperous, and they take the prosperity as something that is granted, like as a something natural, as a something that is here forever for good. But if we look at other countries, for instance, they are not sleeping, you know, like we at the Western hemisphere are we are the world champions in regulations, right? So everyone wants to have a safety, security, everyone wants to work less and have more leisure time and these kind of things. So we are starting to forget like what is behind the rise of prosperity in the West. And if you look at the working hours, for instance, and if you look at Germany or France or other countries, even Slovakia, and if you compare it with Slovakia 30 years ago or Germany 30 years ago, or if you compare it even, let's say, with Korea or Japan or something, so we work way less than we used to, and we work way less than the other parts of the world. Like obviously, like one might say that this is one of the achievement of the capitalism, that you work less and you have more or produce more. Obviously, we are also observing the rise of productivity, but still like the work needs to be done. And as I say, like we are world champions in regulations, and this is not a good way of doing things.
One of the other parts of this dynamic, I say, or this paradigm, maybe is a better term, is that you start to see throughout Western societies that we make so many things available. If there's ever a need, government will start to provide it. I think you in particular have talked about how in Slovakia, whether it be electric wheelchairs or other things that are just, if you need it, you can get access to it. Some people look at that in the conversation, they say, well, this is compassion if the society is able to help take care of needs. Others look at it and say, where does this end, right? So how do you engage in that conversation there in Slovakia?
This is also a very good question, and this is very, very complicated because it also has, there is a sentiment towards the communism in a sense that like everyone in the past during the communist times, everyone had a job, everyone had a apartment or a house. So there were kind of these securities. So there were like officially there was zero unemployment, and people were kind of equal. So, but what the other side of the story is that the people were not like equally rich, but they were equally poor. And this is something that people don't realize when they tend to revive this sentiment to former times, you know, during communist times, because still there is a like huge sentiment towards like past in my country, and we see it even like Slovakia along with Hungary are like two countries in Europe who have a strong affinity to Russia even now. Like our prime minister is traveling to Moscow to meet Putin and the Russian officials, and it doesn't sound good in Europe and in like a developed world, you know, like in democratic world. So but it is about this like securities and stuff, you know. So this is why there is such a compassion about this, and it's difficult to explain to people like this is not because of politicians that you have these achievements or these possibilities or these options. It's thanks to the rise of prosperity, and this prosperity was not created by politicians. It was created by the businesses and entrepreneurs. So yeah, it's really difficult.
So let's talk about this rise in the welfare mentality, right? This is part of what we're getting at, and we start to see, especially throughout Western societies in the United States, we look at Europe and see Europe ahead of us in this rise in the welfare mentality. But ultimately, what we're describing here is where people are defaulting or relying on government for many of their needs. In fact, even when it comes to loneliness and filling those gaps. And you've given a talk on that in the past. So what is it about European society, or what is it about the cultural shift that's happening on why we're seeing such a rise in this welfare mentality?
You're giving me very tough questions, and this is also one of them. I would say, like, this is this admiration of the nanny state. Like, people are lazy, like, to take care of, or are becoming lazy. Like, I don't want to generalize or something, but I think that there is a tendency of people they are kind of giving up of their responsibilities, and also like obviously hand in hand, like they are losing their freedoms and their properties, right? But people are somewhat lazy, and it's very convenient and very comfortable if there is government or someone who takes care of you. So I think that this is a kind of general tendency, and we don't know where this ends. Like, for instance, it's not only about the handouts or giving the money, but also regulating. You were talking about the loneliness. Like now in Switzerland, for instance, you cannot have one guinea pig at home because it would feel lonely. You need to have at least two. So there is a regulation, there is a legislation in Switzerland that requires to have at least two guinea pigs at home, right? So we sincerely don't know where this ends up.
So as we think about all this, Richard, and we talk about what we see happening throughout the world and the shift, I go back to the shift in your career and your personal vision and why you jumped into this from science into the worldwide freedom movement. So I'm interested in what is driving you? What is it every day that causes you to lead and to step into that breach further?
This is all about the passion. This is something that drives me. This is something that don't let me slow down, and also this is also something that is very characteristic for my team. We don't open the free positions for anyone. We always headhunt people, and we see like if those people are passionate and if they are like fighting for the cause, if they are like true liberals and free marketers. So even in my organization, it is kind of there is such a chemistry, like this free market chemistry. So I would even say that it is in the DNA of those people, of those folks working for with my organization. So it is not something rational. It is something, something emotional more, I would say.
Folks, if you're inspired by Richard and his colleagues at INESS like I am, I invite you to go to atlasnetwork.org where you can learn more about their work and support their work. Join me in becoming an Atlas Club member where you can help Richard and his colleagues all throughout the worldwide freedom movement. So Richard, let me shift there and ask you about this worldwide freedom movement, right? So here you are working on vaccines and deciding that you've got to get involved in helping to save the world, and you get your brother and your colleague Yuri and you all team up and form INESS. And at some point in time, you got involved with the Atlas Network and you found out, hey, there's others like me and I've got peers and friends throughout Europe and throughout the rest of the world. Take me through that experience. Why has being part of the Atlas Network mattered so much to you and your organization?
That is a very, very good point and a very, very good line. We founded INESS in late 2005 and started working in January 2006. And I think it was in 2008 that I first got to New York for Atlas Liberty Forum. And it was a completely mind-changing experience because as I said, in Slovakia, back then there were two think tanks, free market think tanks. One of them was mostly idle, so we were kind of the only active, and there were few people that you can talk to and you can meet, and you were back then also the internet resources were not like today. There was no YouTube, no lectures, no very hard access to books and everything. And suddenly you appear in the epicenter of the liberty movement, and you meet these hundreds of people. Many of them, you read the articles from them, you even let's say wrote emails to them and got response or something. And now we were able to meet these heroes of liberty in person, So it was I got a goosebumps when I arrived there, and it was 3 days or something, and it was so energizing. It can't be expressed by words.
And everyone is invited to join us each year in New York at the Liberty Forum and Freedom Dinner. You can go to atlasnetwork.org to find more information about that. But I promise you, the Worldwide Freedom Movement will be in New York every November. And I remember it was either last year or the year before. I'm in the ballroom, and there's hundreds of people throughout the world that are there. And I see across the room, I think it's you. And I start hollering your name, and I'm like, hey, Richard, and I start getting in about half the distance. I realize, wait a minute, that's not Richard, but it kind of looks like Richard. And that's the first time I officially met your brother in person. And we talked about music and everything, which you and I are about to do here in a minute. But let's come back to this experience of being part of the Atlas Network. And I want to talk about the coach, compete, celebrate model that Atlas has, because you and I really got to know each other through the Transatlantic CEO Summit that Atlas does. So what's that experience been like for you as a leader of a think tank, meeting with your peers and participating in that experience?
this is actually the whole story, right? Because I've been somehow affiliated with Atlas for almost 20 years. It's 18 years or something. And as I said in the very beginning, I was just the attendee of these conferences. Then in 2009, I attended the think tank MBA organized by Atlas, and it was really like a super experience. So the facilitator was great, the peers were good, and also I learned a lot about strategy, fundraising, like about everything, right? So this was super great. And then obviously, like we also applied for Templeton Freedom Awards, and we won twice these Templeton Freedom Awards. And we also applied for some grants from Atlas. I became not a frequent, but let's say speaker at the Atlas conferences, at Atlas events, and at Atlas educational programs at the Leadership Academy. And so it is a kind of long journey, like I started as a greenhorn, let's say, and then as I was gaining experience, now it turned to, like, now I'm more like sharing experience than that let's say gaining experience, right? So now when I travel to Atlas events, so it's not only about the lectures, I mean the conferences, right? So it's not only about the lectures, about meeting folks, about trying to set up new collaborations, some projects or something, but it's also about the sharing the experience, from the position of now, I would say, like experienced think tanker. And this is why also I love these CEO summits organized by Atlas, where American think tank CEOs and European think tank CEOs get together and they talk to each other for 2 days, for 3 days, and they are exchanging the experience, like inspiring each other. And this is lovely. Like I really love this, and I always get so inspired.
Yeah, I always give Atlas Network a lot of credit for starting and sticking with those CEO summits. You and I have a mutual friend, Svetla, with IME in Bulgaria, and she and I often talk about that very first CEO summit you and I were part of. I don't know if us American CEOs were going to earn our welcome back with the European cadre, but gosh, we've become great friends and learned so much, lifted each other up. And so I'm going to ask you, Richard, if there is a donor, a supporter right now that is listening to this conversation you and I are having, and they're encouraged about Atlas Network bringing leaders together, and they're thinking about supporting Atlas Network and INESS and our peers, what would you say to them? What advice would you give them if they're thinking about donating to the cause?
I would say a few things. First thing is that the freedom is not granted, the liberties are not granted, so it is a kind of constant struggle and constant fight for freedoms and liberty. The other thing is that there are regions in the world where liberty is really under pressure. And both in these regions, but also in, let's say, like more wealthier countries, there are brave people who are constantly trying to keep the torch of freedom, and who are defending freedom, who are fighting for the freedom, for the prosperity, for the free markets, and for the diversity, for human rights. And they really deserve your support. And those are the people who are changing the world for the better. Like no one else is going to do this. Like those are those brave people who are doing this.
You're talking about the people doing the work, and you're talking about the future and the next challenge. And you have often talked about the next generation or the younger generation. In fact, I believe the last time I heard you speak, maybe in Brussels at Atlas Europe Liberty Forum, Atlas Networks Europe Liberty Forum, you said that this next generation, if we have another recession, they're going to be the ones who lead us out of it. So when we focus on the future and the younger generation, what are we failing to teach them right now? And how is INESS pressing into that and making a difference?
That is a very good question. Like, yes, I really said in Brussels that if there is a change, and if there is a change of paradigm or change of like, let's say, maybe even some recession or something, we need to we need to be prepared. So we need to have like scenarios for how to get out of it stronger, and we need to be prepared. So my point is that we really need to help young generation. Like I don't want to, I don't like saying like teach them or explain them or something, but to help them, because many of those young people are very clever, wise, hardworking people, and we can share our knowledge, our expertise, our accumulated knowledge, I would say, and so that they can continue what we started. And young people usually listen more to young people, like like as Terry Kibbe likes to say, like Hayek is forbidden word, like right. So it needs to be someone younger who speaks to young generation. So this is why we need to help them, to cooperate with them. And I'm glad that even in my country there are groups of young people who are very active in this field. We also have these Slovak Students of Liberty, and also in Europe on the continent, and but also in the US there are many young folks who are fighting for liberty.
Yeah, previous Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio podcast featured our mutual friends at the Georgia's Future Academy and their inspiring story about working with young people and getting them engaged, and just how the young people are actually leading the freedom movement there in Georgia. I encourage everyone to go listen to that podcast, watch that conversation if you haven't already. Richard, let me ask you, we've talked a little bit throughout this conversation just about think tank. You've been a founder of a think tank that you've now run for 20 years. You have to explain what a think tank is, but you're leading every day through different movements and the evolution of society and culture challenges in Slovakia and throughout Europe. So what is it that a think tank can do and can't do to address the challenges, and what advice would you give to your peers that are leading think tanks right now?
This is a very good question. Like, from my perspective, one of the most important things for think tanks is consistency. Like our advantage over or compared to other let's say thinkers or other movements or something is that we have a very strong anchor. I mean, like ideological anchor. Like for instance, my organization is leaning on like Austrian economics and the principles, and this allows us to be like 100% consistent. Like we never said different things on the same issue over the 20 years, right? So consistency is one of the things, and also repeating stuff. Like we tend to be like people very quickly get bored. I mean, like people don't want to repeat the same stuff for, let's say, a year or 2 years or 5 years or something. But in our world, this is super necessary. So it's not only about writing new stuff and preparing new presentations and meeting the new politicians, but still repeating the same stuff and saying and explaining where are the roots of prosperity, of economic growth, of let's say freedom and liberties and human rights and everything. So I would say it's consistency and repeating the stuff. And what we shouldn't do is to compromise, like to make like step backs only for the sake of let's say some short-term wins or something, because I don't think this is a good strategy. So this is my point.
Yeah, great advice, Richard. Right, the battle between principle and politics, that a lot of times to be able to move an idea forward through a political process, many leaders, many think tanks struggle with that decision. Do we go all in on the political movement? The Overton window is a discussion we have a lot. I'm excited about that conversation with our peers as we go forward in the future. Dr. Ed Fulner, who helped found the Heritage Foundation, right? We know very well, always would say there's no permanent victories and no permanent defeats, right? So I'm wondering this mentality that you have and knowing that in recent history, I mean, 30, 35 years ago is still very recent history in terms of world history, a country that has emerged from being a former Soviet satellite state to having this robust freedom and opportunity that now society is starting to evolve and struggle with. How do you and your colleagues at INESS deal with this day in, day out, this idea of no permanent victory, no permanent defeat?
This is difficult, but I would say I would compare it to war. Like you kind of used to it. Within those 20 years that INESS has been around, we are, I would say, like vast majority of the time in a kind of hostile environment when the government is social democratic, and so this is kind of 80-90% of our existence, that we are kind of not having wins, but we are kind of trying to prevent the losses. So we are kind of pulling the handbrake and trying to stop the bad and harmful legislation that would influence the economy and the prosperity and the liberties as well. So like we are living in this for vast majority of our existence, you know.
Let's press into that, right? Slovakia has had some big changes since INESS founding and that you've been involved in. What's the future for Slovakia? What does it look like? What do you see? And where are you and INESS kind of leading and pressing into Slovakia right now?
This is a very good question, because Slovakia is really not at a good path right now. Like we were back then in 2004, 2006, we were the leaders of the reform efforts in Europe. So we were kind of heroes for all the country. Like everyone was trying to imitate what we were doing. But since then, like we are losing, you know, like we got rid of flat tax and many of those successful and important reforms. Right now, we are increasing taxes so that in the whole region we have the highest taxation. So from the leaders, now we are losers, you know. And it is not only about these economic issues, it is about the like political economy and about the politics as well. Because as I mentioned, like our government is very much friendly, I would say even friendly towards Russia, you know, like despite the fact that they are helping Ukrainians, for instance, in the war because of the commitment towards the European Union and stuff. But like they are traveling to Moscow, they are meeting with the Russian ambassador and the embassy and stuff. So this is a very difficult position. And also the businesses you can hear about the fatigue that they have when we talk to businesses. Like they're saying like we don't know how long we can bear this, like this burden. Like we might leave the country, you know. So what we are trying to do obviously is to push for these free markets, right? So to stop all this bad legislation. But we are, you know, like it is a think tank. It is not a political party. So
you mentioned, and I'm just interested in talking about how the conflict in Ukraine right now, the war that's happening not far from your borders, how that's impacted Slovakian society or the work that you all do and the conversations you're having. I'm reminded that one of the first conversations you and I ever had at dinner with our friend Zilmanish at the time, that was leading the Lithuanian Free Market Institute, we talked about each one of our grandfathers and how they were involved in the Second World War and probably not too far from each other. It was a pretty chilling moment. And so, for those of us around the world that aren't as close to it, how has that impacted the discussion or the work that you do? And is it different from a few years ago to where we are today, or is it still a driving force in conversation?
It has been changing because right now we are the country that was perhaps the most hardly hit by the Russian hybrid war. So, like how the Russians.
What do you mean by hybrid war? Real quick, explain what you mean by hybrid war.
Let me find the English expression. It is like uh, uh, it is the influencing the discussions at the social media. So Russians are famous for the troll farms where and the bots and everything. So they are kind of infecting the discussions on the internet in my country with these like pro-Russian narratives. And people tend to believe like once like we have a saying that when there is a lie repeated for 100 times, it becomes a true. I don't know if you have something in English. So people, when they are constantly exposed to these kind of misinformations, so they tend to believe there is some true behind, right? So this is how Russians were successful to undermine the critical thinking of the vast majority of population. I also think that you had something similar before elections in the US. So, but in my country, this is kind of the most opulent one. Like it really hits hard the thing Slovaks think.
Richard, we've talked about your background, and we've talked about the think tank and the organization, the work that you do in Slovakia, but we haven't talked about music. And so I got to dive in here because that's something a lot of folks don't know about you, and it's one of the reasons I referred to you as one of the most interesting guys in the worldwide freedom movement, because you're a musician. I mean, people can get your music right now. So talk to me about why. Well, what is it about music? Why do you still play? Why are you still writing music?
To me, music is, and not only to me, obviously, music is one of the most not only important, but also the prettiest, nicest things ever. Uh, it brings joy, it brings friendships, it brings goosebumps, it brings all kinds of emotions. So this is why I still play guitar. I have a band. I compose music. I write lyrics. I perform with my band, and I also composing some my own solo stuff. So music is very like connecting people, and I will give you an example like how it helped me, for instance, in my fundraising for my organization. Like there are many people who love music, so it's not only me or you or let's say free marketers, but it's like many people really like music. And for instance, foreign ambassadors in Slovakia, they formed a band some 15 years ago, and they invited me to play in this band. It was called Philanthropy Band, and we were playing at the philanthropy events and like huge philanthropy events. And there were like 6, 7 ambassadors from different countries, and I, as a representative of non-government organization, was also playing there and singing. And it happened that like many people that otherwise I would never have the opportunity to outreach and to meet. I met those people. There was also another band I was playing with. It was called the Business Leaders Band, and the leaders from business who were also keen on music, they formed the band. And one band member was one of the one of the wealthiest persons in my country, entrepreneurs and businessmen. So now, also, even the president of our country was having 1 or 2 shows with us. He is also the president of the country, was singing and playing the guitar next to me on the stage, and also at some charity events. And it's just amazing, like how music helped helps to connect people, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing I might quarrel with you on a bit, Richard, is when you referred to music as such a beautiful thing, you could tell you're a singer-songwriter, because a drummer like me, it's probably not always a thing of beauty when you get sticks in our hands. But
We, ha- we have a saying that the drummer is the best friend of musicians.
That's that's good. I'm going to use that. That's fitting. So, how has your work with INESS, and how has being part of this political, social, cultural conversation in Slovakia informed your songwriting? Or is your songwriting actually informed the work that you do? How do those work together?
I'm not really trying uh, to shift my work into my music. Also, one of my latest music songs was about the freedom, but in more like general about the freedom. I know that there are musicians in free market movements like Manu Martin from France, who is writing very kind of liberal, or in American terms, libertarian music, and about the helicopter money, about Ben Bernanke and others. But I'm trying to not to avoid, because it is not like intentional, but other inspiration comes to my mind when I'm doing the songwriting.
If someone listening right now, I'm sure, is saying, well, I got to hear this guy's song. So if they're on Apple or Spotify or whatever, how do we find Richard Durana's music right now?
It's everywhere on all streaming platforms. If you want to listen to my band, it's called Space Recorder. So just find Space Recorder, or also my name for my solo work, but it's all in Slovak, I believe. So I would recommend Space Recorder.
Folks, go to Apple and Spotify, look up Space Recorder or Richard Durana, and hear his music. And while you're there listening to it, go to atlasnetwork.org and join me in supporting Richard and his colleagues all throughout the worldwide freedom movement. And being part of the Atlas Club is a great way to do that. Richard, let me ask you about our colleagues in the worldwide freedom movement. As someone who has been leading a think tank that you founded for 20 years, what advice would you give to a peer that is maybe just getting started? Maybe they just took over a think tank, or they just launched an initiative that they're passionate about. What advice would you give them?
This is not an easy question, but I got maybe like two major advices. The first thing is try to get in touch in wiser people than you are, and try to connect with guys, or to work with guys who can inspire you. And because many people obviously think that they are the best, and if they are the leaders or the presidents or CEOs, that they are untouchable or something. But this is not a good approach. So you need really to have the best people around. So this is one thing. And actually, it's not easy to get those people. Like, we are still struggling to find the talents, like passionate talents who would like to do like full time, for the think tanks. And the other thing is that focus on fundraising is super important, because then it is a kind of vicious circle. Like, people very often, and even in my country, in many organizations, like, they complain like they don't have funds for doing good projects and good work. And I'm saying, like, why don't you use the fundraising? It's like we don't like doing fundraising, and we need to do the things that we want to do, right? So it is a kind of vicious circle, and unfortunately, if you don't have funding, you just will never do the stuff you want to do, right? So this is one of my like most important advice. Like, focus on fundraising from the very, very beginning, and try to get as many funds and as many donors who are willing and passionate to uh, kind of support your work as possible.
That's great advice. I often tell our colleagues, like, look, you believe in this, right? You're passionate about this. You're wanting to save the world, and you need other people to help you do that. Why would you not ask others to be involved in this with you and give them an opportunity to join you in that effort? And I'm wondering, though, as you're talking about advice to peers, and we have some of our colleagues throughout the world that are facing pressure right now and quite a bit of resistance. That's something you have to have dealt with in being in a post-communist Slovakia and over the last several decades that you've been doing this work. How have you dealt with that? What's kept you going through that?
It is the same thing that wakes me up in the morning and forces me and drives me to get to work. It is the passion. It is the passion for liberty. It is the passion for free markets. It is the passion for Austrian economics in academic terms. And yes, even in my country, the government is preparing the foreign agent law, which is labeling the organizations who are receiving money from abroad, for instance, regardless if it's money from the US or if it's from Czech Republic or even Lithuania or other countries. And yes, there are countries, let's say Georgia and others, who are really where really the civic sector and the NGOs are under very, very strong pressure. And it's not easy to work under those circumstances. And I personally know many people in Georgia who are struggling now, who are kind of officially stopped their think tank activities because of the government, because of the police, because of the everything, and now doing more things on individual and personal basis because they cannot stop doing this. This is this passion which drives those folks. But this is really bad, and I think that they really need our help and the help of others, as we are kind of worldwide community of people who really value the liberty as one of the most important virtues.
I think about the conversation I was able to have on the podcast with Alexander from Georgia's Futures Academy. I encourage everyone to go look that up on Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio and find that episode and conversation that we had. Richard, I'm thinking about the future that we're talking about here. You and I, every time we meet, we talk about being family men, right? We talk about our kids and share stories. And so as you have this passion, as you're heading to work, like you referred to before, every day with this passion, and you think about your family and the future in Slovakia and in Europe, what gives you hope? What keeps driving you in that passion that you can save the world, as you said early on?
There are two factors. One of them is obviously my family. I have 3 kids, and I'm really thinking about their future, and I think that I've got this in common with vast majority of people on Earth. And the other factor is all those folks in past who were fighting for the same cause, and they were fighting till the very end, despite the fact that they have not succeeded, but they knew what is the first best. They didn't compromise, and they were fighting till the very end. And I admire those people. And it's not very humble, but I would like to be kind of, I would like to act as those people also till my end. They like the freedom and the liberty deserves this.
So, Richard, there's one thing I'm curious about that every time you and I are together, I find myself thinking about this after I leave a conversation. So here's a guy who's been a scientist, an educator, founding director, and a leader in public conversation and leading a think tank, and is also a musician. So many different hats, so much depth to you. What has surprised you most about your journey and what you've learned about the influence on who you are today?
Wow, man.
I know I'm hitting you with them, aren't I? I'm hitting you with them.
I would say it is the people I met who got the same passion for the same things. So it is not like one person, it's not like one experience, but it is a combination of people, thoughts, breathing, and everything that kind of formed the personality. So I wouldn't like to pick just one accident or one element or something. So it is a combination. Like life is diverse, life is complex, life is nice. Unfortunately, we only have one attempt. So so we need to get the most of it.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning the people. We are passionate about people at Atlas Network. We're passionate about a worldwide freedom movement that gives those people a better life, more opportunity, upward mobility. I personally want to see everyone live out their purpose and be able to achieve what they're working toward and what their passion is, like you mentioned early on. So I invite everyone to join us in Atlas Network. Go to atlasnetwork.org, where you can learn more about Richard and INESS, the Institute for Economic and Social Studies in Slovakia. You can find out how to get involved with he and his colleagues and his peers all throughout the worldwide freedom movement. And my last question for you, Richard, today, as I like to ask many guests on the podcast, because you know me, I love to eat, I'm a foodie. So imagine that tomorrow, myself, one of our listeners, shows up in Bratislava, and they want to have a Slovakian meal, or they're going to get together with you and go out. What do we need to eat? What is the biggest thing in town we got to do?
Slovakia is becoming a cosmopolitan city, but still we have our own traditions and our own folklore, and also the cuisine and food. So I would obviously, or I must recommend, it is a kind of duty as a Slovak to recommend what we call brinzové halušky. And it is kind of potato gnocchi with sheep cheese and bacon. So this used to be a traditional Slovak meal for hundreds of years. So this is what I would recommend.
Well, I will be sure to put that.
Yeah, and obviously the beer afterwards, because in this region the best beers are brewed, so you don't want to miss a beer in Slovakia.
Yeah, early in the conversation today, when you were doing all of the cities and what was in your region with a short drive, that's what was going through my mind, is like, this is beer capital of the world. I think we need to go take this road trip. So, well, Richard, such a pleasure having this conversation, as it always is. I think we all learned quite a bit and are inspired by you. I want to thank you for your time, but I also want to thank you for that passion that you've talked about. You're truly a leader in the worldwide freedom movement. We look forward to partnering with you and helping you moving forward. And again, I want to invite everyone to go to atlasnetwork.org and join me in supporting Richard and his colleagues. Richard, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Michael, for having me and for this lovely conversation. And let's keep up fighting for the freedom.
Absolutely. Folks, go to atlasnetwork.org, go to Apple and Spotify, and listen to more conversations. And until next time, thank you for joining us on Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio.